Hello, welcome to America's Future. My name is Bill McNally. My guest today is Mr. John F. McManus. Mr. McManus is a staff official of the John Birch Society for over 35 years. He's one of the organizers' official spokesmen, and he serves presently as the national chairman of the campaign to have Congress stop the FTAA. Welcome, Mr. McManus, to Windham, New Hampshire.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. Let's start off and ask, what is the FTAA?
The FTAA is an extension of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and that involved the United States, Canada, and Mexico. The FTAA is a plan to expand it to include all of the nations of the Western Hemisphere, 34 of them, all of them except Cuba. And so it can be said with certainty that the FTAA is NAFTA on steroids.
So what can we expect? What is the effects of, let's say, NAFTA?
Well, NAFTA, there's a group in Washington called the Economic Policy Institute, and they've published some statistics showing that NAFTA has been responsible for the loss of 879,000 American jobs. Entire communities have been wiped out. The one that comes to mind is in North Carolina with the Pillowtex Corporation. 6,500 jobs left the community of Kannapolis in North Carolina. But all across the country, you see in Wisconsin, 80,000 jobs have fled. In Ohio, 200,000 jobs have fled. And certainly, I'm sure there are people here in New Hampshire, in New England, who've been affected by it. I know over in Maine, the Democrat congressman over there, a man named Michaud, has targeted NAFTA for the loss of jobs in the logging industry. So it's cost jobs, but it's also opened wider the borders. We have an estimated 4,000 people a day coming across the borders from Mexico, and they now have a category that they call other than Mexicans, OTMs they call them. And these are Arab-speaking and Eastern European-speaking. Might some of them be terrorists? Well, there's certainly nothing to stop a terrorist from coming across the borders, that's for sure. Let me also mention sovereignty. NAFTA has been responsible for court decisions and edicts coming down that have changed the laws in the United States. And a NAFTA tribunal is now made some rulings where it supersedes all federal, state, and even the Supreme Court decisions. And so we're trading our sovereignty. So you got the jobs problem, you got the borders problem, but even more important, you've got sovereignty. And now they want to extend what NAFTA has done to us for 34 nations in Western Hemisphere. It's got to be stopped. We can't allow it.
Well, when did this FTAA propose? When was it proposed, or when did it start?
Well, actually, it was proposed formally in 1994. That's 10 years ago. But just prior to it being proposed and passed by Congress, Henry Kissinger and David Rockefeller, two very leading internationalists, people who I don't think have a whit of interest in sovereignty in this country, they both came out and said that NAFTA would be the beginning of something that would involve the whole Western Hemisphere. So they said that 11 years ago. Then NAFTA was passed in 1994. And then what do we see? We see more and more people saying now, well, we've got to draw on NAFTA and expand it. President Bush has said that. NAFTA has been such a success, he said, that we now should expand it. No, it hasn't been a success. It's been a success if you're an internationalist or if you don't care about U.S. being an independent nation.
Well, can we compare this to the European Union?
Yes, we can. And in fact, quite a few people have said we ought to do to the Western Hemisphere what the European Union has done for the Europeans. Well, what has it done? Well, first of all, the Wall Street Journal said that. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution has said it. Mexican President Vicente Fox has said it. And a lot of others have said it. EU is wonderful, and therefore we got to do the same thing here. Well, what's the EU done? The European Union has destroyed the sovereignty of those nations in Europe. The European Union now has a legislative branch, an executive branch, a judicial branch. It has its own central bank, like the Federal Reserve. It has the euro currency. They have license plates, and they have a motto, and they have the EU this and the EU that and everything else. They have superseded the laws of many of the nations in Europe, and they recently came out with a proposed constitution which says right in it that this supersedes the laws of all the member states. So forget it. France isn't an independent nation anymore. Germany isn't. They're all subdivisions of the European Union. And this is the greatest concentration of political power in the history of mankind. And they want to do exactly to the Western Hemisphere what the European Union has done for Europe.
Interesting. Is there any connection here to the United Nations?
Oh, there is. The European Union says within it many, many times, in conformity with the United Nations Charter, with respect to it, and all over. In 1994, when FTAA was first proposed at a summit of the Americas in Miami, Florida, they published a Declaration of Principles. And in the Declaration of Principles, they said that they adhere firmly to the principles and the intent of the United Nations Charter. So it's UN everywhere. What you see happening is, first of all, there are 191 nations in the United Nations. And if you set out to be the leader of the world, you want to be a world leader. You want to be everybody subject to you or your group or something. If you had to destroy the sovereignty of 191 nations, you'd have a pretty big thing to chew. That's a pretty big chunk to bite off. So what they do is they get nations into groupings, like the EU, like this proposed FTAA. There's an Asia-Pacific group. There's an African Union. There's a South American thing called Mercosur. And so get all these nations submissive to these groups, and then it's very easy to get the groups into the world government that you really wanted in the first place. And that's what it's all about. And that's why we got to block this FTAA. And then if we can block the FTA, I'm saying the people of this country, going to your congressman and your senator and saying, no on this FTAA. President Bush has been sending a man named Robert Zoellick all around the Western Hemisphere. He's our trade representative, and he's lining up the nations, and I think they've got them just about all now. Brazil is a little hesitant, but they'll follow along. So they've all agreed to it, and then it will be proposed to the different nations and their legislatures. Most of them in Latin America will go for it. The United States is key. Can we get enough members of Congress to say no? And if we can, then maybe we can get out of the NAFTA. There's something else we didn't even mention here, and that's the World Trade Organization. That's another one. 147 nation grouping in Geneva, Switzerland, that has now superseded U.S. laws and is doing the same kind of thing to us. Our sovereignty is going down the chute, and they mean to continue and have a one world government.
Well, who are the people then that are pushing this FTAA?
Well, the FTAA was conceived in 1994, and it was the work of a whole bunch of groups: the Council of the Americas, the Organization of American States, the Forum for the Americas, this, that, the Trilateral Commission, the Council on Foreign Relations. And in every instance, all of those groups were either founded, funded, or chaired by David Rockefeller, who is a longtime internationalist, somebody who wants a world government. He wants it run by himself or people like him. Henry Kissinger's behind it, and so forth. So you will find the top leaders of our government who are members of this Council on Foreign Relations. You'll find Vice President Cheney and George W. Bush, who's not a member, but he takes direction from them, obviously. All of these people, internationalists, they don't want America to continue as an independent nation. For them to swear an oath on the Bible, an oath to the Constitution of the United States, is a lie.
Seems like I read a quote by Newt Gingrich, who said something about these trade agreements. Do you remember?
Well, he was talking about the World Trade Organization. You know, he was the leader of Congress back in 1994 when the World Trade Organization was being proposed. And he said that this is not just an ordinary trade agreement. This is a transformational movement, and this will transfer a sovereignty of the United States to an international organization. He actually said that. Of course, he's a member of this Council on Foreign Relations as well. And then he twisted arms, got him to vote for this World Trade Organization that is now superseding U.S. laws on steel tariffs, many other things, even the price of bananas. You know, that we have to go to Geneva, Switzerland to find out what the price of bananas is. And the World Trade Organization, in the year 2000, a congressman from Texas named Ron Paul, he sought to have the United States withdraw from the World Trade Organization. And he said that the reason to get out of it is sovereignty. And he made a very profound statement about that, presented it to his colleagues, and it was defeated. We're still in the World Trade Organization. We're still in NAFTA. Now they want us to go into the FTAA. And it's time for the American people to realize that America is being sold out. And it's not being sold out by some foreigners. It's being sold out by our own leaders. And so we see the media, we see the people in government, we see establishment figures all across the way, even some clergymen promoting this. But FTAA has been kind of below the radar screen. There's an awful lot of people never even heard of this, and yet they intend to have it finished, delivered to Congress, and have a vote on it early in the year 2005. And most Americans haven't heard of it. They've heard of NAFTA. So we can go to people and say, well, will you help us to stop this FTAA by contacting your congressman? They'll say, what is FTAA? We'll say, well, have you heard of NAFTA? They say, yeah, NAFTA's cost a lot of people their jobs, opened up the borders and so forth. Yes, FTAA is much, much worse.
What's the effect that the European people have felt on this European Union as it's progressed so far? Well,
people are starting to wake up. In Europe, there are small political parties that are starting in the different countries. One of the most successful is in England. It's called the United Kingdom Independence Party. And that little group now has 12 of England's seats at the European Union's Parliament. So there are 12 Brits who are going to go over to Brussels and be part of that European Union Parliament. And one of the ones who was just elected in June of this year is a popular television personality named Robert Kilroy Silk. And so they asked him what he intended to do when he got over to Brussels and took part in the European Union's deliberations. He said, wreck it. That's what he wanted to do. And so he's quite a hero now amongst a lot of Europeans. And this small United Kingdom Independence Party is really shaking them up. They came out second in the in England's elections in June. Which is unheard of because it's always been the Labour Party and the so-called Conservative Party. But the United Kingdom Independence Party is there. Now over in the Czech Republic, you've got a former Czech president. His name is Václav Klaus. And he talks about the European Union and condemns it. He said, this is crossing the Rubicon. After this, there will be no more sovereign states in Europe. Only one super state in Brussels. We are against the European Union. Well, so it's growing there. There's opposition moves in Belgium and in Denmark and several of the other countries. But the people over there have been sold the same kind of thing that was sold here. They were sold the idea that the European Union was simply a trade agreement and it would benefit everybody and the trade would come up and there'd be a lot better exchanging of goods and more wealth and so on. That's how NAFTA was sold here. Well, has NAFTA been good for America? No. Recently, I saw a piece in the Los Angeles Times. This is interesting. They interviewed a man who is an illegal immigrant in the United States. And they wanted to know if he thought that NAFTA was good for Mexico. And with a burst of absolutely pure logic, the man said, if NAFTA was good for Mexico, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't have come across the border and come to America. He said the only people benefiting from NAFTA are those who already have more. All right? I'd like to see that man as a senator in the United States, an illegal immigrant Mexican. Right? Mm-hmm. He makes more sense than a lot of our own legislators.
Didn't Vicente Fox say something regarding this FTAA?
Yes. He said he wants to have the FTAA and he wants to see it because he wants to do exactly for the Western Hemisphere what the European Union has done for Europe.
So he recognizes that connection.
Yeah. A lot of these internationalists, these people who don't like national sovereignty and so forth, they want this because they expect to be the people running the world. And I say no. I think we go back to the Constitution of the United States.
Do you think that this FTAA will start off with any paragraphs dealing with open borders, or will that come later as it's...
Well, go back to NAFTA. NAFTA was 900 pages of regulations, and they called it a free trade agreement. All right, now, free and 900 pages of regulations, it just doesn't bounce. I call it an extended oxymoron. Right? It's not free, it's 900 pages. All right, it was in April of this year, the year 2004, that a NAFTA tribunal ruled in a dispute involving a Canadian and an American firm. It had already been adjudicated in the courts in the United States. It was over. So the Canadian, who didn't get his decision, he went to NAFTA. And it turns out that NAFTA has Chapter 11. And Chapter 11 establishes this NAFTA tribunal that has, it supersedes, its decision supersede state, federal, and even Supreme Court laws. And so the reporter who was writing this article was in the New York Times. He went to John Kerry, and he asked Mr. Kerry if he knew anything about this. And he said, well, we didn't expect that that would happen when we voted for it in 1993. It's his job to know what's there. And one of the NAFTA tribunal judges is a former U.S. congressman, a man named Abner Mikva from Chicago. And he said after this decision was handed down that he helped to decide. He said if Congress had known there was anything about like this in NAFTA, they never would have voted for it. Well, it's their job to know what's in it. All right, now, so you asked, is the FTAA going to have anything to say about borders? Is it going to have anything to say about this and this and this? Is it going to set up its own? Yes, it'll all be there. We haven't seen it yet because they haven't presented the full FTAA agreement, but it'll be there.
Well, maybe there's a comparison here to how the roots of the European Union started. In other words, when did it come about? And
well, the European Union started over 50 years ago. It started as the European Coal and Steel Community with 6 nations in 1952. But they were given legislative authority, and they were given all kinds of judicial authority. It was just getting started. And then it became the Common Market, and then the European Economic Community. And it grew to 12, and then to 15. And there are now 25 nations in the European Union, and more clamoring to get in. Turkey wants in. And if Turkey wants in, of course, there's no more borders anymore in Europe. You can walk right across France to Germany. You used to have all kinds of checkpoints and so forth. They don't have them anymore. But if Turkey gets in, you're going to have an invasion of Muslims, more so than what they've already got, and they've got a lot. And there are some people in Europe beginning to say, wait a minute, this is going to change our whole culture, this is going to change our whole way of life and so forth. Maybe we ought to stop and think about this. But the leaders of the various nations, Chirac in France and Schroeder in Germany and all these others, they're all internationalists. They want this thing and they want it big. They're going to be part of the group to run the world.
so the European Union basically morphed from a small agreement.
Small agreement with 6 nations.
And then
now it's 25.
And now they want to approve a constitution.
They want to approve a constitution which says right in it that the European Union's decisions shall have precedence over the laws of member states. That's the end of sovereignty, right there.
And are they using the United Nations goals, or are they?
Well, they say within this charter, this Constitution for the European Union, I think I counted 11 different times I saw the name United Nations. I've looked through this proposed Constitution. So it's going back to the different countries. But the resistance that's growing in Europe is such that nations that didn't want to do so are going to have to now present it as a referendum item for the people in their countries. Tony Blair in England, who is very much in favor of all of this stuff, he's finally succumbed to the point where he has to allow the British people a referendum to decide whether or not they're going to go into the European Union totally. And England is one of the few countries that hasn't adopted the euro. But there are probably, of the 25, there are probably, I don't know, somewhere between 12 and 18 of them already have used the euro. They've done away with their currency. There's no more franc in France. There's no more mark in Germany. There's no more lira in Italy. There's no more pound in Ireland. They used to have the pound there, and it's gone. It's all euros now.
Well, let's talk about you're the campaign director to activate Congress to stop the FTAA. And you're also a publisher of this magazine,
That's right, the New American. This entire issue of our magazine just came out in September, is all about the FTAA. There's 14 separate articles in here, only one of which I wrote, but my team has done a good job analyzing the various aspects of this thing. Everything you'd want to know is in this about the FTAA.
And you also have, I have some copies here of pamphlets that says "Say No to the FTAA." That's part of your campaign tools.
Yes.
And in it, it gives paragraphs and information on the FTAA. And then
Well, that's the brief article, and this is the heavy one.
the heavy one.
Right.
And then there's another short one here. Also, there was another one that said crossing or open borders.
That's right.
This
There's
one
one
here
on the
deals with-
borders. That's on jobs.
This is on jobs and economics. And inside there's quotes. It says here, let me read a quote from David Rockefeller, former chairman of the CFR and the Council of the Americas. He's referring to NAFTA, the precursor to the FTAA, and he says, quote, "Everything is in place after 500 years to build a true new world in the Western Hemisphere."
You know, that's an interesting quote. He said that in 1993 as they were getting ready for NAFTA. But he told you in 1993 that everything is now in place to build a Western Hemisphere deal. So he was saying that NAFTA is only going to be the start of what they want. And of course now the FTAA, now they're coming forward, and David Rockefeller is very much promoting this FTAA. So they tell you what they intend.
Now you have a website.
We have stoptheftaa.org.
Okay, maybe we can show that on our screen.
All right, and if you wanted to call us by telephone, you can call the John Birch Society, 1-800-JBS-USA-1. Very easy to remember. 1-800-JBS for John Birch Society, USA-1. And we're glad to hear from anybody. But if you go to the website, you'll see that you can ask for information, or you can order some books, or you can order the magazine. You can do all kinds of things. And we hope a lot of people will do that.
And you're asking people to contact their congressmen.
Here's what we're asking.
And senators.
All right? We would like people to write to your congressman and your 2 senators, separate letter to each, and say, what is your attitude regarding the proposed FTAA? That's all. Now you'll get an answer back, and your answer might say, yes, I'm in favor of it, no, I'm not, or usually what you'll get is, thank you for your thoughts. All right? So then you say, okay, you write back. And then you give them a couple of reasons why they should be opposed to the FTAA. Then you might get another answer. Then you write a 3rd letter and you send back to them again and you say, here's some more reasons why you should be in favor of this. Please assure me that you're going to vote against this when it comes up early in 2005. And then you not only do that, but then you got the guy who lives next door to you to do it. And then you get the guy who works with you to do it. And then you get somebody else, and then you get Uncle Bill and Aunt Tilly and Uncle Steve and everybody else. And the more letters that they get on this subject, you'll get their attention. And if they start hearing from people that they've never heard from before, it will have some impact. So what's the address? Congressman so-and-so, House Office Building, Washington, D.C. Senator so-and-so, Senate Office Building, and don't abbreviate it SOB. Senate Office Building, Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll get the letter, and you should get an answer from them. It's very important. I think that this battle to block the FTAA is the most important battle that I've been involved in with the John Birch Society in 35 years. It's that important. We've got to stop this. We've got to get enough congressmen. Happily, there are a lot of Democrats who are opposed to this because they see the loss of jobs and they see the environmental concerns, and there are some. Unfortunately, Republicans seem to be following the lead of President Bush, who is very strong for this.
Now, you're the author of this magazine here.
No, that's a book.
I mean, book, The Insiders, Architects of the New World Order. There's an interesting quote here when people are considering, does the Birch Society have any effect or or how effective is it to write to your congressman?
Do we ever get anywhere? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm quoting here from shortly before the House voted to impeach President Clinton in December 15th, 1998, there was a report in the Washington Post, and it noted that, quote, leaders of the John Birch Society, unquote, were among the, quote, early impeachment activists. And in this article, the Post's editor, Thomas Edsall, remarked that the success achieved by the Society and a few allies, quote, is a demonstration of how a determined and ideological committed group can change the course of history.
That's right. That's right. You know, it doesn't have to be tens of millions of people in the John Birch Society to get a job done. It has to be a determined minority. We are that, but we would like to see more people help us. So, you know, we're always interested in having people look into what the John Birch Society is all about. 1-800-JBS-USA1 is the phone number, or you can go to the stoptheftaa.org website, and then you can link to the John Birch Society and link to several of our other things.
Now, I understand the John Birch Society has speaking tours.
Oh yeah, and I'm one of the speakers.
And you've just come back from a tour in California talking about the FTAA?
Absolutely.
And from that website, people can find out where speakers are speaking?
Yes, yes. And the turnouts in California were appealing. There was a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of people get stirred up and say, yeah, this obviously is a big problem. We got to do something about it. And that was gratifying to me.
I understand a speaker is coming to this area, Dr. Steve Bonter,
Yes.
who will be talking, I guess his subject is, Will America Stay Free?
Yes, and he's going to be talking about the FTAA as well. He's a good friend of mine, one of the people that goes out and speaks on this subject. We have several.
And he's doing the New England circuit.
He's doing a New England circuit, right. I'll be going out again in October to Texas and Louisiana and Arkansas, a few other places.
Well, okay, Mr. McManus, I thank you very much for coming up here to Windham. I'd like to thank the Windham Cable TV 21, the producer Jim DeDonner, and the volunteers that help behind the camera. And we appreciate your effort here, and we hope you'll stay tuned for other programs that we can bring you in the future. Thank you for watching.